This video is a simple demonstration of PAD's layout and router. Now normally when you create a circuit you would be creating it in a schematic capture program like PAD's Logic or DxDesigner, but in this case I'll be doing it from within PAD's layout. So to start off, I'll enable the Eco toolbar, press OK, and click the Add Component button. Now first I'll look for a resistor by typing in RES and an asterisk, which will search for all the components that start with res, which are the resistors. So here I have a 1/4 watt through-hole resistor. I'll add that one. And I also want the 2-pin header, which is a header O2. And I'll add that one as well. Now with the Add Component button enabled, I can also just click on a component to duplicate it. Now we need to add the connections between the components by clicking the Add Connection button. And then I can click on the pin and click the endpoint, then press Escape to stop connecting them. And I'll just do this for the rest of the connections. Now I'll adjust the layout a bit. So I'll go back to the drafting toolbar and move around the components. I can drag them around. I can also press Ctrl R to rotate them. Something like that. I also want to move around these documentation as well. Next, I'll add some text by clicking the Add Text button. Just enter my name, and I'll make sure to change the layer from top to silkscreen top. If you just leave it as top, that'll put the text in the actual copper layer, whereas the silkscreen will be painted on. Press OK and put it somewhere. Now I'll add the board outline by going to the Board Outline and Cutout button. And I'm going to have a rectangular board, so I can right-click and choose Rectangle to do that automatically for me. So I'll click in the corner and click somewhere here to create my outline. Now this isn't really an exact fit, my name is kind of coming off. I can either move it around or I can change the board outline, but you'll notice I cannot move it. I can't select it. So I need to change my selection filter. To do that, I can right-click and choose Select Board Outline. And then I can kind of improve my fit here a bit. That's pretty good. And then to go back, I just right-click again, deselect everything, right-click, and choose Select Anything. The next thing I'll do is change my pad stacks, which means the sizes of the holes and the pads surrounding them. The default sizes are okay for machine soldering, but using a soldering iron is kind of annoying when it's that small, sometimes even impossible. So to increase the size of the copper pad, I'll go to Setup, then Pad Stacks. Now for each of the pins, and for each of the layers, I need to change the diameter of the pad to a larger size. In this case, I'm going to be using 80 mils, which is approximately 2 millimeters. Now, I can ignore the inner layer because this is a two-sided board. It's not multi-layer. So I just need to go to the opposite side and update that one. And because the resistor only has one type of pin, I only need to update that one. So I'll go to the next decal, which is the header. And yes, I want to update them. So I need to change the diameter to 80 mils for the mounted side, the opposite side, and the mounted and opposite sides for the other pin. And press OK. You'll notice that they're a lot bigger now, a lot easier to solder. Next up are the design rules, which specify things like the minimum distance between components and the recommended sizes of the traces. So I can go to Setup, Design Rules, and I want the default, so rules for the entire thing, and I'll change the clearance. So the clearance in general, for Seneca, we need about 12 mils. So I'll change all of them to 12. I'll change the trace width, the recommended to 20 mils, and the maximum to a larger number, and press OK. The next step is to route the design, but before I do that I need to save so that PADS doesn't crash on me. So I'll do that right now. Okay, now to open up PADS router, I can click the Route button. So when I'm routing, first I need to make sure that I'm on the correct layer, because since I'll be making a single-sided board rather than a double-sided, I want to make sure that my traces are all on the bottom layer. So I can change my layer selection to bottom. And next I need to enable the right toolbar, make sure that the route editing toolbar is enabled. Then I can use the interactive route tool to go in between each of the connections. So I click on it, and just click the endpoint. Just like that. The routing is done, so now I'll go back to layout by clicking the layout button. So the design is done. I just need to export the documents in order to send it off to be manufactured. So I'll go to the File menu, go to CAM in order to set up the right documents. So first I will add a routing plane associated with the bottom layer. I'll name it bottom, and I'll change the output file to something that makes a bit more sense than art002.pho, so I'll call it bottom.pho. The PHO just stands for photo plotter, which was the original way of creating PCBs. Now I'll click Device Setup and regenerate the aperture tables. These are just the sizes of the tools that will be used to create the PCB. I'll also need a drill layer. I'll name it drill and set the document type to NC drill. Press OK. I also need a silkscreen layer for my text, so I'll name it silkscreen. Change the document type to silkscreen. It's the top layer. Now the default settings for the silkscreen are not perfect. If I go to preview selections, you can see there's a whole bunch of other junk here that I need to get rid of. So these other references here, header to resistor 1/4 watt, shouldn't be there. So I need to set up my layers. Let's see, change the top, the part type should be disabled. So now if I preview that, it's now good. Close that, press OK, and rename the file to something that makes a bit more sense. Finally, I need the board outline. Now this is a custom document type. go to the layers and select board outline and give it a better name. The last thing to do is to export the documents that I've just set up. So I'll select my CAM directory. I have one on my desktop. You can always create another one if you need to. I'll select all of the layers and press Run to generate all of the documents. And you'll notice I just had an error there. That means I forgot one step. Let's take another look at this. Offsets are too small. Plot will be centered. Now, the reason for that is because my origin is right here, but my entire design is to the top and to the left. If you notice in the bottom right corner, over here, you can see the x and y coordinates, but my design is in the negative x, so I need to put everything positive. To do that, I can go to Setup and set my origin and click somewhere down here. And that should fix the error with the exporting the CAM documents. So when I try that again, everything worked. Now if I was going to actually get this design manufactured, I would go to my desktop and zip up those files and then send them off to the manufacturer. And that is how you use PADS layout and router to make a very simple circuit.